Welcome back to Season 2 of the Spider's Web Podcast. The Spider's Web Podcast weaves together humor and knowledge into bite-sized episodes. I'm joined every week by the Soul Vacation, and I'm Spider Theory. Let's get started. I want to say Happy International Women's Day, or is it National Women's Day?
It is Women's History Month, and today is International Women's Day.
It is International Women's Day today that we're recording this.
Book recommendation for all the women and women lovers out there. It is called Who Cooked the Last Supper, and it is about the history of feminism, the natural history of matriarchal societies. I haven't completed the book, and I also am not an expert, so there might be some problematic things in there that I wasn't 100% in tune on. However, I will say learning the history of matriarchal societies has provided me a lens to look critically at our own society. So I highly recommend Who Cooked the Last Supper.
Love the implications of the name.
Yeah.
That there were, everyone loves to focus on the Last Supper, and it's like, okay, well, the Last Supper couldn't have happened without the women behind it.
And that's what this book is about, because in all of modern society, deities were female, because through the process of giving birth, we are creators. We create life. So it's called The Woman's History of the World. Who Cooked the Last Supper, subtitle The Woman's History of the World by Rosalind Miles.
Oh, cool.
And you know what else they talk about heavily in it? Is that a lot of creationism was either female or non-binary.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yes. Non-binary people have been here. They've just been written out of history.
So I was torn between two different topics, but now remembering that it is Women's History Month and International Women's Day.
At the time of this recording.
Yes, at the time of the recording, I think I am going to go narrow it down to speaking about Elizabeth Bathory. Do you know who that is?
No, never heard of her.
And I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name completely correct, but so Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman, and this was in the 1560s. She lived from 1560 to 1614, and you might know her as the Blood Countess, and she was accused of being a serial killer and killing 650 people, mostly girls and young women.
Ooh. So she's known as a serial killer or a vampire? Unrelated Countess.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking vampire because of Countess.
Right. Yeah, I think vampire lore sometimes will mix in some things from this story. But she was, if you look up her name, she is known as a famous female serial killer.
And if you want more vampire lore, check out in season 1 of the Spider Web Podcast our episode on Vlad the Impaler. And then what was the vampire tuberculosis one?
Yeah, it was the one you talked about. It was American Vampire Panic, about how in America there was a sweep of vampire panic during like pandemics and shit because of tuberculosis. Yes. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of her, and that is what she's known for. She's known for being this serial killer who did like absolutely outlandish things. Like she's known for bathing in the blood of the young girls that she killed to keep her young and beautiful, like absolutely outrageous stuff. And I heard about her a very, very long time ago. But recently I came across some information that implies that she may have been the victim of a conspiracy to steal her land.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Crying witchcraft.
First, I see this video of somebody just talking about her, and then they just briefly mention that she may have been a part of a conspiracy. This is the first I've ever heard of this. So I start to look into it, and when you actually look into the evidence and what she was accused of, they really only have witness testimony.
I.e., a she said versus he said
Yeah.
situation.
Yes.
And this is why women are written out of history. And that is the title of this episode: Women Written Out of History. Or like something to do with history, because we talk about the book.
Yes.
That's
Well, and
what
how
this focus
it's
is.
not even just being written out of history. Like Elizabeth Bathory may have been like her history may have been completely rewritten.
Rewritten.
Yes.
Yes.
And she may have been made the villain. So she married a Transylvanian man, and so when her and this Transylvanian man married, their kingdoms joined. So she got both land, like they owned both places. So she
Yeah.
had a lot of power. He went off to war, and she was left at their home to care for the local people.
Right. She's reigning. Yeah. Which is very common for landowners at the time, fighting wars, and then the women were running the
stewarding the land.
estates. Yeah. And at various scales, up at the countess level and at people. What we're doing now, female domestic labor, dishes in the home, things like that. We women are left to steward the land, steward the home.
Yeah, whatever that looks like. And yeah, so he had to go off to war. She was left to take care of everything. And I need to look into it a little bit more because there is a lot about this, but there were places that were saying that she was providing medical care to the local people. I don't know how. Like I looked into her past, and she doesn't have a medical past. It doesn't say she was very intelligent. She knew like 5 or 6 languages. She was educated.
How do we become healers without being doctors or having the paper?
Right,
we
yeah.
are passing wisdom down generation by generation, and women have been for generation, and that's why you have to empower yourself and learn how to heal yourself.
Some people are talking about how she may have been providing medical care, but other people are saying there's really no evidence for that, so I don't know why some people are assuming that. But she had a lot of land. Her husband went off to war, and then he came back and he died, and then so she was left alone with all of this land. And that's by that time, like, these rumors, well, I don't know if they were rumors, but these accusations had spread all over the kingdom. Everybody had heard about it. Which
remind me of the accusations.
So she was accused eventually of kidnapping and killing like 650 women and children. And I think
that's
there were
outrageous.
some right. Yeah. Thank you. And like that's
I'm
ridiculous.
loving this story. I am loving this story.
Right. And when I heard it, I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, she killed so many people. But now I'm like, that's not even possible. No, you didn't.
And what's the odds that it connected to everything we pre-talked about? It being International Women's History Day, the way that women's history is not told, it is completely rewritten.
Yeah.
Not only is it not told, it is rewritten.
Like, worst case scenario, this woman was providing medical care to her local community, and she was accused of killing a bunch of children. She has this Lutheran minister make a complaint against her, both publicly and at the court in Vienna. Matthias II, I don't know who that is, but he assigned 2 dudes to go investigate. And these guys go and they collect like 300 witness statements or something crazy like that.
So basically, all 300 people said that they saw her kill 2 people. And that's how.
Well, and that's just the thing is, like, when you go through it, something like only 80 of the witness statements are not hearsay. Out of all 300, if you actually look at them, almost all of them are people just like, yeah, I heard that this happened. And so you have only 8, which 80 witnesses is a lot. We have to admit, 80 people who have corroborating stories that said they saw the same things.
But what it sounds like to me is she's only killed 2 people.
I mean, even then, that's pretty bad, right?
Yeah, but even still, but that's your history being rewritten.
Right. Yes, exactly. Even if she only killed a couple of people, they're like, she was this horrible serial killer who bathed in the blood of her victims.
Do I care this lady killed 2 people? No, it happened 3,000 years ago. She might have done it, and that makes her a bad person.
Yeah.
But they wanted her land, so they
Yeah.
convinced you that she killed 600 people.
Yeah. Right. Oh, and you know where that number came from? Someone said they saw it written in one of her diaries.
Mm-mm.
Excuse me. So these dudes are going around, they're getting all these, some eyewitness statements, mostly hearsay witness. You can't even call that a witness, you guys. So we have 80 or so actual witnesses out of the 300, and they do have similar stories. It could still be a conspiracy, I don't know. But let's talk physical evidence, shall we? They get all the witness statements together, and then they're like, okay, we gotta go to the castle and just catch her in the act. And so they go, and they get there, and they say that they caught her torturing people. Like as soon as they get there, she's going at it. And they find one dead girl and then one like currently being tortured. And in actuality, they found her and she was just eating dinner. And they lied. They didn't find her torturing anybody. They did find a dead body. They did find somebody who they said was in the act of being tortured. If you didn't know anything about providing medical care, someone with a
Right.
splint or their leg raised, or maybe they had an abortion.
Right.
Maybe
A dead
you don't
body,
know.
dead body.
They don't describe what they saw. They said they were being tortured, but again, some people said she was providing possible even gynecological care to the young women in the town.
Snaps and happy International Women's Day, and this message is to remind you to support reproductive rights.
They go and report what they found. They found her torturing people in the act when they got to her. They found a dead body. And so she is taken and found guilty. And she was supposed to be put to death, but they decided that would be way too outrageous because the public knew what was going on. We can't put a countess to death. So instead, they put her in isolation to live forever in this fucking castle. Oh, and I do want to mention that they did get confessions from everybody who worked with her and tortured everyone, and they got those confessions from torturing them, which we know now is not the way you get confessions. People will lie under torture. And so all those confessions that were made can be thrown out because they were made under torture. So that's another issue with this entire thing. But she didn't get to write her story.
She didn't get to write her story,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't know. We're all speculating. Even the quote-unquote evidence that you're reading is still a form of speculation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not speculation. I guess it's like Fleetwood Mac would say, secondhand news.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what sucks about this. The only thing you can do, I think, is go back and read the notes that these dudes fucking made, and then, which are the witness statements, which they recorded them. Who fucking knows what they actually said? And also her own letters.
And I think that's the big thing, that lesson takeaway that you can have here, is that women need to tell their stories. Mm-hmm. So if you're on TikTok, if you're writing it down, if you're sending letters back and forth, your stories need to be told. As mundane as you might think it is, it could help. We're written out of history, and the way to stay written in is to tell your stories. Contribute to your local newspaper. They're always looking for editorials and would be happy to run a story. There are so many ways you can get your stories out there. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, tell your story.
Something I wanted to bring up about this was so I originally saw that video about somebody going, and they were touring her home that she had committed these supposed crimes in, right? This castle. It still exists to this day. And they're walking through and they're showing it and they're talking about her. Everybody had dungeons back then. So they go in her dungeon. They're like, look at all this torture devices in her dungeon. And then they pan over and they show an Iron Maiden. I don't know if you know, but Iron Maidens are not fucking real. They are mythical devices that never were used ever. And they're saying that they put one in her castle and they're like, look at all the torture devices. This is why I was also like, I believe the fucking conspiracy that at least
Yeah.
things have been exaggerated. Maybe she did murder one or two people.
Exactly.
Did she torture
That's what
them
I
and bathe in
think.
their blood? I don't think so. And the fact that to this day, the people who are making money off of this put a freaking Iron Maiden in her castle to further this freaking bullshit story. And it is bullshit. She didn't kill 650 people. She didn't kill 650 people, and she didn't use an Iron Maiden.
That probably wasn't a dungeon. It was probably
Food
hay
storage.
storage.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was probably food and hay storage, right?
Yes.
But can you believe that? They're like panning and there's an Iron Maiden there, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, what the fuck?
And this is why it's important for people to tell their stories, and women tell their stories. Because now, some Joe Blow in Austria in Hungary, is profiting, telling some awful story. And also, this is what the book also talks about. The why we cook the Last Supper is that men go and observe the world, and then they make extrapolations on it from their experience. And it's because men would want a dungeon to torture people.
Yes, right.
That's why that's the story they've uncovered. Women's history. That's why we have to have Women's History Month, people. And International Women's Day, people.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Spider's Web Podcast. You can follow us on TikTok at the Spider's Web Podcast, or you can follow me at Spider Theory, or the Soul Vacation at the Soul Vacation. We'll see you next time.